Here is part of a workshop company in harbour. Beneath the cover of these trees, vehicle crews are carrying out their daily maintenance and holding themselves in readiness for any job that may come along. There are occasions when you have to get out on a job in double quick time. And in an emergency, there's seldom time for donning your best bib and tucker, but this should not be an excuse for slackness in dress. Amongst other vehicles parked in this harbour is the Scammell six-wheel breakdown tractor, noted for its excellent cross-country performance. This vehicle is capable of travelling across the roughest ground owing to its robust construction and its large section tyres. Housed under the bonnet is a Gardner diesel engine giving ample power at low speeds. Its winch drum, just behind the driver's cab, carries 430 feet of cable and has a pull of 8 tons. And here is the powerful jib, which can be used in 2 positions and is capable of lifting anything up to 3 tons. Upon receipt of a recovery call, an officer passes the message on to the NCO in charge of the Scammell crew. All necessary details about the casualty have already been entered on a casualty card by a member of the casualty's crew. But this is not sufficient, and a further checkup is essential upon your arrival. Then, map references are carefully checked before final instructions are given to the recovery crew. Never start out on a job without checking your map reference and obtaining as much information about the job as you can, and don't forget to leave this map reference with the officer in charge of the harbour. Now you can set out. A trained crew is soon off the mark. There is no last-minute panic in searching for missing equipment. Everything needed is safely stowed and secured in its proper place on the vehicle. You can take a Scammell almost anywhere. The vehicle is specially designed for cross-country work. Your front wheels are cross-sprung, giving an independent front springing effect which is particularly suitable for traversing uneven ground. But nevertheless, drivers should always look for the easiest and smoothest passage. The rear wheels on either side pivot on a common axis which gives them an ample up and down movement. Here you see the sort of ground you may have to tackle, and the way in which the wheels are able to follow the contours of the ground. This large and easy movement of the wheels enables you to go almost anywhere. Well, almost anywhere, but not into ditches like this. This tank is the modern damsel in distress. But don't worry, Ma, the Scammells are coming, hurrah, hurrah. Yes, instead of the chivalrous Sir Galahad, there races to the rescue of the modern damsel, the modern recovery vehicle. Accurate map reading guarantees your locating the casualty in the shortest space of time. It also enables you to anticipate any difficulties in the geography of the location. On active service, this anticipation is of paramount importance. Upon arriving at the job, the recovery NCO gets a report from the casualty NCO and makes his initial reconnaissance. A thorough initial reconnaissance is extremely necessary. It saves time, trouble, and very often prevents accidents. There are many things an NCO must take into consideration before operations begin. The condition of ground surrounding both casualty and recovery vehicle and the state of mechanical damage to the tank helps to determine the type of pull needed for the recovery of the casualty. After this initial reconnaissance, the NCO, having decided to winch the tank out, orders his driver to place his vehicle directly in line with the proposed pull. The rear end of your Scammell is the business end, so this end should be pointed towards the casualty. All signals are given by hand, and when necessary are relayed to the driver by a standby who would take up a position a few paces in front of and away from the cab. If at any time you have to winch across or on a road, always place a man on traffic control. This is of course not necessary when working away from a road, as in this case. And now, with your vehicle backed into position, winching operations may begin. The only person on the job with authority is the one in charge of recovery crew. He is the only one to give orders. In other words, the man who plans the job must carry it through. Skid pans having been laid under the front wheels, the order to pay out winch is given and relayed to the driver by a standby. To pay out winch, the driver checks to see that his handbrake is on. This helps to anchor the vehicle. He then places his lorry gear in neutral and takes the winch brake off. Now the cable can be paid out by hand. This is not a heavy job and can easily be tackled by 2 men. But don't take your cable on a cross-country ramble. Always look in the direction you're traveling. Sufficient length of cable is now run out to the casualty. Here you double in your tracks, taking the free end of your cable back to your holdfast or ground anchor. This is usually laid parallel with your recovery vehicle whenever conditions permit. The free end of your cable is now shackled to the holdfast, whilst the hawsers are shackled to the casualty. Every item of equipment now laid out must be inspected by the NCO before winching operations begin. The pull is known as a 2-to-1, that is from Scammell via the snatch block to ground anchor. Once everything is to his satisfaction, he orders his driver to take up slack. You should always run in your slack before allowing your winch drum to take up the strain. Any sudden jerking is bad for the drum and might easily snap your cable. A final once-over, and all is ready for winching in. The signal is given and relayed to the driver by the standby. To winch in, the driver first applies his power transmission brake, then his road wheel brake, which helps to anchor the vehicle. Now he checks to see that the lorry gear is in neutral and starts the engine, depresses the clutch, pulls up the power takeoff lever whilst the clutch is still depressed, and starts to engage the winch by pushing this lever into position. This Scammell chassis may help to give you some idea of what happens. Here is the winch drum, and this is the winch drive pinion. The bar and its dogs must engage any set of holes in the face of the pinion drum. To bring the dogs into line, the bar must rotate. Let's start up and see how it works. Depress the clutch and push down the power takeoff lever. The winch drive pinion is now rotating. At first, you may not score a bullseye, but don't force it. Remember, the bar has to line up with those holes in the rotating wheel, so you feel for it, and it finally engages. As soon as this happens, the driver releases the winch brake, the brake band on the winch drum relaxes and frees the winch pinion. The speed of running in is now governed by your hand throttle, smoothly at first, until the full strain is taken. Slow and steady is the only way to get a job done without danger or damage. Although we're winching a cruiser tank, the Scammell is equally capable of recovering heavy tanks. The rear rollers help to guide the cable as it runs towards the drum. On the Scammell, there is a paying on device designed to prevent the cable overlapping and bunching up on the drum. It is these spring-loaded rollers that keep your cable tightly pressed against the drum. Another thing peculiar to all Scammells is the winch protection afforded by a safety cutout device which comes into play whenever the strain of your cable exceeds 8 tons on a direct pull. This is the pivot on which the entire winch frame is pivoted, and here is the spring holding it in place. When excessive strain on your winch causes the frame to move on the pivot, this movement extends the spring, and this small wire shuts off your engine. But let's see the cutout device in action. The frame swings on its pivot, extends the spring, and the wire cuts off your engine. When this happens, immediately depress your clutch to ease the load. On the job, the casualty is hauled out of the bog with a smooth, slow and steady pull until it is on firm ground. The signal to halt being given, the driver depresses the clutch, applies the winch brake, disengages the power takeoff and releases the clutch. Now let's repeat that. To halt, you depress the clutch, apply the winch brake, disengage the power takeoff lever, and release the clutch. Before you can unshackle, it is necessary to slacken off your cable. This allows sufficient play to withdraw the shackle pins. When on the job, don't leave all the work to the other man. Don't go dreaming all the time. There is plenty of work for everybody. Do I sleep? Do I dream? Or are visions about? Well, that was only his dream, Sergeant. Don't dodge the column just because you belong to the casualty crew. Remember that he also serves who only stands and waits. Once a casualty has been safely winched out, and whilst the unshackling is being carried out, the casualty should always be examined for mechanical damage. If everything is okay, all that remains is to pack up and go to the next job. There appears to be very little wrong with the tank itself, so that's what we'll do. The snatch block having been taken off, the cable is winched in. All equipment is now returned to its rightful place on the lorry and secured. The NCO of recovery satisfies himself that everything is all right with the casualty. He probably tells the tank commander not to make a habit of this sort of thing, though he can always rely upon recovery to get him out. Now he can go off onto job number 2. This the NCO finds already entered upon a casualty card. Our casualty too is soon underway, so both rescuer and rescued seek new fields to conquer. Like other recovery vehicles, the Scammell is capable of towing itself out of difficult ground. This is done by passing the winch cable around the rear pulley, over guide roller number 1 at the side of your chassis, under guide roller number 2, and through these 2 front rollers. The special locking plates prevent any possibility of the cable riding over the rollers. Now, by attaching the free end of your cable to an anchor or tree, you can haul yourself out of any difficulty. But don't make a habit of it. It's your job to pull others out, not yourself. Here's a casualty that needs a suspended tow. So we'll see how our Scammell tackles it. Whilst the casualty's driver pours out his tale of woe, we'll take a look at some further features of the Scammell. Weights, each about 150 pounds, are held in these racks to balance any load on the jib. At the rear and front is a spring-loaded towing bar. This front one is able to pivot on a hinge and allows you to start the engine by cranking if this is ever necessary. The rear bar is identical except that it doesn't pivot. It's very rugged in its construction and will stand really heavy loading. But let's get on with the suspended tow. The NCO decides to use the jib and the crew gets to work. When traveling, the jib is always kept in its stowage position. This position should never be used for lifting. It's too close to the tailboard. To use this jib, first slacken its cable. The hook must be kept clear of the pulley. And now, to extend, first loosen the locking pin nut to remove this locking pin. With the locking pin removed, you extend the jib from the stowage position by turning the handle at the side of your jib. It now runs along into the required position. When the two pinholes correspond, you reinsert the locking pin and screw on the nut. Now you're ready to give a suspended tow, so back your lorry towards the job. Once the front of the casualty is lifted by the Scammell's hand-operated jib, a triangular distance frame is lashed to its front and to the rear towing hook of the Scammell, thus preventing sway in transit. Having hitched up, always give the job a last once-over before setting off, and check up again after travelling a short distance to take up any slack after the load has settled down. It's always better to be safe than to be sorry. On a cross-country tow or over rough roads, take the front wheels off. And so back to the REME workshop, where you can deliver the casualty for overhaul. Besides suspended towing, the Scammell is often used for hauling recovery trailers. It's just another of the many uses to which this fine vehicle can be put. Here is another job for the Scammell with its jib fully extended. A jib in this position can lift anything up to 2 tons and gives increased height over the 3-ton position. When next you're up to your neck in trouble, console yourself in the thought that a Scammell 6-wheeled breakdown lorry is racing to your rescue, and with its powerful winch and jib, it will soon pull you out. And whether the tank is ditched, bogged or bellied, it's the Scammell that'll get it back into action again.
In the field of recovery, you not only have a variety of equipment at your disposal, but a number of recovery trailers and tank recovery transporters. Of the recovery trailers, there are 2 main types in general use, the lighter being the 7.5-ton cranes. It's a 6-wheeler with a hand winch for loading a casualty onto its platform. Here is a Bren carrier about to be loaded. The trailer has already been lined up with the casualty by its tractor, a 3-ton Leyland 6x4 breakdown. As the crew double to their work, each man knows the jobs he has to do. One applies the trailer brakes, another unshackles the Warwick strainers, while a third releases and extends both the rear jacks. Whoever applies the brakes also frees the ramps by releasing the bar securing them to the platform. With the second strainer unshackled and thrown clear of the ramps, the next thing is to remove the chocks. Then attach one of the 2 winch handles. All hands are needed to slide the ramps down. To position them, you simply slide them off your platform and lay the top end into these hooks. Before winching operations are begun, towing ropes are shackled to the rear towing eyes of the casualty, ready to be passed under its belly. Meanwhile, the winch cable is paid out. As one man turns the winch handle, another applies the necessary tension to the cable. Before and during winching in, the NCO examines the shackling and alignment and ensures the casualty taking a clean run up the ramps to the platform. You'll notice that the second winch handle is now being operated. By steady turning, two men are able to winch quite a heavy load onto the trailer. The trailer winch carries 50 feet of 5/8 inch diameter steel cable. It is possible to use the power winch of the tractor, so either hand or power are available to suit the job in hand. Once the casualty is well and truly up on the platform and the ramp stowed, it is firmly secured both front and rear, not only by chocks, but with Warwick strainers. The NCO is the responsible man, and he gives everything a once-over before moving off. A word of advice: always recheck your strainers after the first mile, when the casualty has settled down. Another hint: as it is impracticable to reverse your towed trailer, don't overshoot your turning or drive into a blind alley. You'll have a hell of a job getting out again. Another use for the crane's trailer is giving a suspended tow to a heavy-wheeled casualty. This is often the case when a casualty is too heavy to suspend from a breakdown jib or gantry. Whenever called upon to give a suspended tow like this, the casualty is loaded in the normal manner and secured to the trailer by Warwick strainers. Remember to leave your casualties steering free. This enables the front wheels to follow their natural path when taking bends. That was the 7.5-ton Crane's light recovery trailer. Now let's turn to the second type, the 20-ton Dyson, onto which we are going to load a D8 Caterpillar tractor. Each man will do his own jobs. First, all trailer brakes are applied by turning the trunnions situated on the near side. Meanwhile, the D8 is squared up with the trailer. The driver, if necessary, dismounts to lend a hand in unloading and positioning the ramps. These ramps, although heavy, can be quickly placed into position by 4 men. Never drop these ramps on the ground, otherwise you'll need a skyhook and pulley blocks to lift them up again. When both have been positioned, it is essential to maneuver the D8 into direct line with them. The NCO mounts the platform so that he can check alignment and signal to the D8 driver who, from his driving seat, cannot see the ramps. Always get the D8 in direct line before mounting the ramps, to avoid steering when actually on them. While the Dyson trailer can be used for transporting other equipment, it is normally employed for carrying the D8 tractor. Once the NCO is satisfied that the tractor is dead in line and safely ascending the ramps, he can jump to a position on the ground where he can still watch the operation and signal to the driver. Failure to jump down might give him flat feet for the rest of his life. Once on the platform, the D8's track brake is applied and the engine stopped. The driver is now free to lend the others a hand in stowing the ramps. When these have been stowed underneath, the tractor is secured by front and rear Warwick strainers and the trailer brakes released. The Neat's parking brake and transmission brake are still applied on the Scammell so she won't run away. Before setting out on the road, the NCO should check the strainers both front and rear. Remember, these will need rechecking after the first mile on the road. As you have seen, the loading drill of both the cranes and the Dyson trailers is quite simple, providing each man knows his jobs and carries them out intelligently. It's just a matter of organization and common sense. And now from trailers to tank recovery transporters. Of these, there are three main types in general use. First, there is the 20-ton Scammell transporter. Its power is drawn from a 6-cylinder Gardner diesel engine which develops 102 brake horsepower. The transporter is a self-contained unit with an articulated semi-trailer forming a horizontal platform. You can see an example of the articulation when the tractor is turned at an angle of 90 degrees. Beneath the rear of the cab is a vertical winch carrying 600 feet of steel cable and having a maximum pull of 8 tons. These are the trailer air brake connections and the electrical junction. Then the trailer retaining bolts, one on each side. This spring-loaded turntable allows the tractor to make the 90 degrees turn you have just seen, while these buffers compensate any lateral shock between tractor and trailer. The path of your winch cable is round this bottom pulley, through rollers, round the center pulley, and up round this top pulley. Here the cable eye is shackled to the side of the frame. When separating or splitting the unit, the platform is supported by this single hydraulic jack. This is found in a central position at the front end of your platform and is lowered and extended in the normal way. These tank locating chocks are adjustable and are provided to fit the inner sides of the tank tracks when loading. The ramps are detachable and are hooked on projections and secured by strainers. To position them, after the strainers have been released, a bar is inserted first into the lower holes to lift them off the projections, then into the upper holes to lower them into position. The top end is hooked onto the projections at the rear of the trailer platform. You have now seen the main features of the 20-ton Scammell tank transporter, which can always be identified by its horizontal platform and detachable ramps. Now for the 30-ton Scammell tank recovery transporter, a vehicle that has already been thoroughly tried out and has proved its efficiency in many theaters of war. It has the same power unit and fundamentally does not differ from the 20-ton you have just seen. It does, however, have a sloping platform instead of a horizontal one, and drawbridge-type ramps in place of the detachable ones. In spite of its larger size, it's just as maneuverable as its smaller brother. Here it is, being reversed with ease through the narrow entrance of a railway siding. The job it has been sent to tackle is quite straightforward. It has to load and carry away a General Grant. The first thing to do then is to maneuver the transporter into direct line with the tank. We are going to show you how an efficiently trained crew in which each member knows his tasks can carry out a loading operation in less than 10 minutes. Here is the crew, and each man has his specified jobs from start to finish. No time